Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah, all praise be to God, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. Okay, so, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So God tells us in the Quran about His attributes, and we see that if you look at these verses 59, 22, 23, and 24, we see various attributes of God. I'm going to read it, God willing. He's the one God. There is no other God besides Him, nor of all secrets and declarations. He's the most gracious, most merciful. He is the one God. There is no other God besides Him. The King, the most sacred, the peace, the most faithful, the supreme, the almighty, the most powerful, the most dignified. God be glorified, far above having partners. He is the one God, the creator, the initiator, the designer. To Him belong the most beautiful names. Glorifying Him is everything in the heavens and the earth. He is the Almighty, most wise. So if you see here, the fact that He is the one God, that is being repeated in the beginning of each one of these verses, and we see various other attributes being mentioned. So, we're being told that one of the most important things for us to remember is that He is the one God and that we should worship Him alone. Before I became a submitter, I knew, we say La ilaha illallah, there's one God, and I would ask myself, what does it really mean? I mean, we all know there's one God, but why do we have to keep saying it? But now we understand, being submitters, what idol worship is and how it's important for us to remember and make sure that we worship God alone under all circumstances. We know from the Quran, obviously, that idol worship is not very intelligent. God tells us in 1672 and 73, and God made for you spouses from among yourselves, and produced from your spouses children and grandchildren, and provided you with good provisions. Should they believe in falsehood and turn unappreciative of God's blessings? Idol worship not very intelligent, yet they worship beside God what possesses no provisions for them in the heavens nor on earth, nor can provide them with anything. So here we're being reminded that, God is the one who created spouses from us, and created from spouses children and again grandchildren, and provided us with all the good provisions. And so He has been looking after us from the very beginning until the very end. And, committing idol worship at that point is very unappreciative. And it's not very intelligent because, these entities that people devote themselves to and dedicate themselves to, their lives, do not bring them anything. And in fact, they end up causing their doom for eternity. Idol worship not very intelligent, as we see in 1673. God tells us that idol worship is the mother of all evil. And, when you think of a mother gives birth to a lot of young ones, right? And those young ones will give birth to others. That's what we see around the world, is when you look at all the miseries and all the problems and that we see in the world right now. If you really dig into the root cause of all of these problems, it always comes down to some kind of idol worship. It's either, some idols like, Jesus and Muhammad, or all these saints that they're fighting over, or somebody has money as an idol and there are wars happening because people are after these monetary gains. And, various sorts of idols, people have in life, because of which they're doing all the illegal things, for example, like selling drugs, alcohol, all kinds of vice in the society, so that, they can, get with their idols. And we see why it's not intelligent. As we see in verse 14:28, it says, they remove their families from God's protection. Have you noted those who responded to God's blessings by disbelieving and thus brought disaster upon their own families? So not only do you lose your own self, but you lose everything that you love. and eternally, this is the destination that they will just miserably suffer throughout eternity. It says, hell is their destiny wherein they burn. What a miserable end. Idol worship, the mother of all evil. They set up idols, they set up rivals to rank with God and to divert others from his path, saying, joy for a while, your final destiny is hell. So these people, when they commit idol worship, and how it's the mother of all evil, it doesn't just stop there when one person, let's say one person became an idol worshiper. It just doesn't stop there. These people then go on and they start converting other people, they don't have to formally go and preach to people, but it just happens in a way that, the evil just spreads, it catches on like a virus, people spread it to other people, and, that's how it works. But yeah, it also works through preachers as well, but other than that, people influence other people and it spreads, and, more evil, comes to this world. So you can think of it almost like, the pyramid scheme, like, people build and, it spreads. So now that we know how bad idol worship is, what does God say? What are God's commandments to us around idol worship? If idol worship is such a serious offense, what does God say about that? We see in Surah 9, verse 17, God says, idol worshippers are not to frequent the masjids of God while confessing their disbelief. These have nullified their works, and they will abide forever in hell. And it says, the only people to frequent God's masjids are those who believe in God on the last day and observe the contact prayer salat and give the obligatory charity zakat and do not fear except God. These will surely be among the guided ones. So the reason why we're being told that is that the idol worshippers are not to frequent the masjids of God is because God tells us that the idol worshippers are polluted. So, and what they do, think of it as a person who's infected in a way, right? It's like somebody's carrying an infectious disease. If you let the person into your home, he's going to infect other people, and it's just going to continue on. And so you need to stop that, and that's why God is telling us that they're not to frequent the masjids of God. Now, this phrase where it says they're not to frequent the masjids of God, I've heard various sort of explanations where people try to relieve themselves from the responsibility that someone has to take care of this part. Like, if I tell you that, you're not to do something, you better not do it, right? It's an active thing that I'm telling you to do. It's not just something that just happens, like, for example, if I tell a kid, hey, you're not to touch this thing, I'm actually commanding this person in strong words that you better be careful not to do this, right? And so when God is telling us, obviously, God is not going to come down to earth, for example, and stop these people from going in. Somebody has to carry it out. And it says, while confessing their disbelief. So obviously when people are coming to masjids, if they're not confessing their disbelief, then that's fine. They can come in, they can sit down, they can listen. But once a person is actually confessing their disbelief, then it falls upon you that you're supposed to keep God's masjids purified. We have an example from God's messenger of the covenant, where he talks about his own father, where his father was coming to the masjid for a couple of months, I believe, and then at one point his father told him that, I'm not going to step into this masjid until you put Muhammad's name next to God. And at that point, messenger of the covenant also said that, he used to be his favorite son and he really loved his father. And but he told his father that as long as you believe that way, he says, you're not allowed to come into this masjid.
I loved my father very much. He loved me very much all our life. But I don't feel sorry for him because he was fighting God actively, and he insisted on going to hell. Yeah, he wanted it bad. Because I talked to him here for 4 months in this mess. And the last one of the times he stood out here outside the mosque. I'm not going in this masjid unless you add Muhammad to the adhan. Yeah? I said, then you cannot come in here because idol worshippers are filth. I have to use that expression from the Quran.
SubhanAllah.
So this is idol worship. You're not satisfied with God alone. So I'm using the example of my own father because I really love them immensely.
So what does God tell us about masjids that practice idol worship? And we see that masjids that oppose God and His Messenger. So God tells us in 9:107, there are those who abuse the masjid by practicing idol worship, dividing the believers, and providing comfort to those who oppose God and His Messenger. They solemnly swear our intentions are honorable. God bears witness that they are liars. And we know the footnote says any masjid where the practices are not devoted absolutely to God alone belongs to Satan, not God. For example, mentioning the names of Abraham, Muhammad, and Ali, and or Ali in the Azan or the Salat prayers violates God's commandments in these verses. Unfortunately, this is a common idolatrous practice throughout the Muslim world. Right? So, I mean, this part here is an example that this is how these masjids practice idol worship. But obviously, we know that any masjid that practices idol worship, will fall into that category where they're doing practices that are not devoted to God alone. Where, if you're doing extra practices, you could be doing, let's say, an extra salat, but your extra salat is not devoted to God alone because God didn't tell you to do those extra prayers. You're the one who invented. So you're committing idol worship. And if there are masjids that are practicing those practices, then they're not devoted to God alone. And then this would apply. This commandment would apply to those masjids as well. And God tells us, do not pray in those masjids. You shall never pray in such a masjid that is established on the basis of righteousness from the first day is more worthy of your praying therein. In it there are people who love to be purified. God loves those who purify themselves, as one who establishes his building on the basis of reverencing God and to gain his approval better, or one who establishes his building on the brink of a crumbling cliff that falls down with him into the fire of hell. God does not guide the transgressing people. So God is strictly commanding us to not pray in masjids, and we should rather be praying in a masjid that is established from the first day on the basis of righteousness. Now, for a lot of people, they say, well, yeah, this masjid was established from the first day on the basis of righteousness, so now they're doing all this idol worship, so now it's okay because I've heard all sorts of explanations, but like they say, well, but because it was established on the first day this way, we can pray there. But that's not how it works, because if you think about it, I mean, there's going to be masjids around the world. Like when submission prevails, all these masjids right now, there are no masjids. There are barely any masjids in the world that are dedicated to God alone. But when submission will prevail, we will see that all these masjids will be rededicated to God alone. And so at that point, we will be able to go and pray in those masjids. It's not the origin of a masjid itself that really dictates, but it's just telling you metaphorically that, a masjid that's built from the beginning, from the foundation of being righteous, and it maintains that devotion to God alone, that's more worthy of you to pray in than a masjid that is established, say, on the basis of some kind of like agenda, or that roots into idol worship and is corrupt. But you're not supposed to, for example, go to every mosque and start digging into their history and find out like when was it founded, who were the founders, and and that would also prevent you from like renting out a building that was maybe initially built as a church, or something like that. It's not really the building itself that would make it, prohibited for you to pray, but it's rather what goes on in that place. If a masjid is dedicated to God alone, and then eventually they start practicing idol worship, I mean, now it's the same kind of masjid. I mean, it's falls into the same category as a masjid that was doing that from the first day. So it doesn't really matter how that works. I mean, there's masjids probably in the Middle East, for example, that were dedicated to God alone at the beginning, right? But then when corruption started taking place and they started mentioning idols, now they're corrupt. But it doesn't mean that we can go and pray in those masjids. And actually, I'm not sure about you guys, but for me, what actually happened with me at one time when I first became a submitter, I actually tried, after knowing that I'm not supposed to pray in those masjids, actually, one time, that was just when I was a new submitter. So, I had my dad's car with me, and he had to go somewhere. So he asked me to be back at a certain time, and so I was running late, and it was time for prayer. So I figured, if I tried to go somewhere else and do my prayer, it's probably going to take some time, and so I figured it would probably be a lot easier and I'll save more time if I just stopped somewhere and I did my prayer. And so as I was just driving through, I just found this one mosque and it was empty, So I was like, well, okay, I think I'm not supposed to pray there, but it looks like the mosque is empty. So I just kind of convinced myself I can go and pray. And I went inside and I did my prayer. And then as soon as I came out and I started driving, I got distracted pretty quickly. And then I just slammed the car into a car in front of me. And obviously I got in trouble after that. So, but I mean, it was just, for me, that was just a, first lesson in submission that, I know something and I'm deliberately trying to overlook it and pretend that I didn't hear it or pretend that it's fine. And, basically I ended up paying for it. Actually, my dad paid for the fix, but I still got in trouble. So God tells us that we shouldn't pray in that masjid. Such a building that they have established remains a source of doubt in their hearts until their hearts are stilled. God is omniscient, most wise. So such buildings, only serve the purpose of spreading evil and causing division and comforting those who oppose God and His messenger. I mean, how does one oppose God and His messenger? Comfort one who opposes God and His messenger. When you have a masjid where people who are actively opposing God and His messenger by disobeying the messenger and saying and advocating things that are contrary to what God and His messenger has clearly stated, they're opposing God and His messenger. So these masjids will, have sermons. As we know, they'll have Quran studies or whatever, lectures and things like that. And all they promote is doubt and falsehood and evil. And that is why we're not supposed to go to those places, because allegorically speaking, we can get infected by that with the idol worship. It's just the way, God has designed this world. I mean, it's not like you can say, I'm going to go there and I'm such a good submitter that if I go there, nothing's going to happen and nobody's going to shake my faith. If you keep going there, first of all, one wouldn't get away with it, but if you keep going there, eventually, they will start to rub off on you, and, with time, it will start to, have its effect on you, and you start tolerating it, and you start falling into idolatry, and before you know it, Satan will trick you into accepting it, and you won't even realize what you got yourself into until it's too late. So, God tells us in the Quran about the believers in the same surah, right after those verses, about the believers that, they're willing to, this is very extreme. They're willing to kill and get killed in the cause of God. And it says the most profitable investment. God has brought from the believers their lives and their money in exchange for paradise. Thus they fight in the cause of God, willing to kill and get killed. Such is His truthful pledge in the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran. And who fulfills his pledge better than God? You shall rejoice in making such an exchange. This is the greatest triumph. So a true believer is one, who's willing to even sacrifice his own life in the cause of God. And this would hold true for anything that you truly love, or any person that you truly love. If you truly love someone, you'd be willing to sacrifice your life for that person or that entity, right? And that should hold true for God, especially because God is the one who gave us this life, and we owe it to God to live it, and even be willing to sacrifice it in the cause of God. And God calls it the most profitable investment. I mean, as the messenger put it as a subtitle, because it says, you shall rejoice in making such an exchange. This is the greatest triumph. To dedicate your life to serving God and be willing to do anything for God. So let's repent. Tubu ilallah. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. And I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. So, as I was referring to masjids that oppose God and His messenger, what does it really mean to oppose God and His messenger? God tells us, 33:57, surely those who oppose God and His messenger, God afflicts them with a curse in this life and in the hereafter. He has prepared for them a shameful retribution. Surely, 58:20, surely those who oppose God and His messenger will be the lowliest. And so, it doesn't take, as I said, it doesn't take a whole lot to, find yourself at a position where you're opposing something that God and His messenger has proclaimed. And we're told to run for our lives from such people. 58:22 says, you will not find people who believe in God in the last day befriending those who oppose God and His messenger, even if they were their parents or their children or their siblings or their tribe. For these He decrees faith into their hearts and supports them with inspiration from Him and admits them into gardens with flowing streams, wherein they abide forever. God is pleased with them, and they are pleased with Him. These are the party of God. Most assuredly, God's party are the winners. So, these people can be your parents, they can be your children, your siblings, or your tribe. They can be extremely close to you. But, you're supposed to run from them for your life. I mean, it's not obviously in the literal sense you're supposed to do that. But metaphorically speaking, you're supposed to really save yourself and not befriend such people. Because if you do that, you're not going to be able to have strong faith. Because it says people who don't do that, those are the people that it says, for these He decrees faith into their hearts and supports them with inspiration from Him and admits them into gardens with flowing stream wherein they abide forever. Right? So we don't want to be the people that become exiled by God because we don't value these instructions that God has given us to safeguard ourselves. Because when we will, then obviously, these are not strangers like the people that are being mentioned here, right? So these are your parents, your siblings, your tribe, and such. And so, when you don't practice this commandment, you'll naturally start to develop, feelings of love and, things like that for these people, and you start to become someone who will want to be more tolerant towards this sort of behavior, and you'll start accepting it and bringing it into your own life. And that's why we're told to run for our life. This does not mean that you're weak or you're threatened, or your belief is, you think that you're not a strong believer. If you're a strong believer, the stronger believer you are, the more you'll practice what God is telling you to practice. And the stronger you'll get by practicing what God is telling you to practice, right? If you think I'm a strong believer and so I don't need to practice commandment, you're going to go down pretty quick. I mean, in fact, I think if the more we know, and the more we try to fool ourselves, the worse it's going to be. Because, and that's, I mean, we've seen people, switch pretty quickly. I mean, Satan is, once Satan is able to trap people, once you let enough, once you make enough mistakes for Satan to claim you, and then God allows Satan to get to you. And once he allows Satan to get to you, I mean, then you can't really do anything, because it's in accordance with God's will. He makes a claim against people that, this person is not following you. Obviously, we all could fall for other disasters related to this world, right? Which is scary enough. But also, he could take control of your thoughts, your dreams, and he could make you hypnotized in a way that you will not realize what you're doing. And we see that from time to time. We see that in people that are not able to see extremely clear and obvious signs. When Satan claims these people, and their hearts and minds become shielded. They cannot even understand the simplest concepts. So that's why we have to take this very seriously. 59:4 says, "This is because they oppose God and His messenger. For those who oppose God and His messenger, God is most strict in enforcing retribution. Do not befriend hypocrites. O you who believe, do not befriend outsiders who never cease to wish you harm. They even wish to see you suffer. Hatred flows out of their mouths, and what they hide in their chests is far worse. We thus clarify the revelations for you, if you understand." So these are people that will harm the believers. They wish to see them suffer. You will see hatred come out of their mouths, and God says what they hide in their chest is far worse. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to happen to you personally. For example, somebody could be doing it against other people, and that's what they're doing. I'm covering all these cases because I've seen these different situations, right? So people will say that, this person or this group is fighting with a certain group, but they're not fighting with me, even though they're wrong, and what they're doing is wrong, and they're opposing God and His messenger. But because they're not doing it to me, I can be nice to them and I can befriend them, which is wrong, because what it shows is that because these people are doing that, they're hypocrites. And now by you going and befriending these people, you're actually breaking God's commandments and hurting yourselves. And of course, then people will say, well, you can't judge people, you don't know if they're believers or not. But of course, we have to make that judgment, because when God says, do not befriend hypocrites, and if you're not able to make that call at any point in your life, you're going to end up befriending these people, because you're not going to be able to make that judgment. So God has given us many different signs about who the hypocrites are, and many people would like to overlook this fact. But it's a reality that's, God could have excluded this if God didn't want us to focus on it, but it's there for a reason, for us to smarten up and save ourselves if we really want to take this seriously. And it says, "Here you are loving them while they do not love you, and you believe in all the scripture. When they meet you, they say, 'We believe,' but as soon as they leave, they bite their fingers out of rage towards you. Say, 'Die in your rage,' that is fully aware of the innermost thoughts." So this, is pretty much a nature of a hypocrite. You might think they are believers and you're loving them and being kind to them, and you believe in all the scripture, and when they come to you, they will tell you they believe. A lot of hypocrites are very, they have a lot of these tools at their fingertips to which they're able to blend in and please other people. And when they meet the believers, they say the things that the believers want to hear. When they go with the other people who oppose God, then they're saying different things. But this is what a hypocrite is. They say what is not in their hearts, and they do things that are contrary to what they say they believe in. When anything good comes your way, they hurt, and when something bad happens to you, they rejoice. If you steadfastly persevere and maintain righteousness, their schemes will never hurt you. God is fully aware of everything they do. I mean, and that just speaks for itself. Like they're anticipating bad things to happen to believers, and when blessings, when they see blessings coming to other believers, it actually hurts them. And when they see bad things happening to them, some kind of disaster, or whatever, it actually makes them happy. And so they will want these things to happen to people, and they strive to make things like that happen. So they're actually harmful. And that's what God is telling us. God does not guide them. No matter how hard we try to guide them, God does not guide the ones He had committed to straying, thus no one can help them. A lot of people will want to help these people, and they think, well, okay, well, they might be hypocrites today, but what if I'm very nice to them and tomorrow they might change? But, I mean, if a person is a real hypocrite, you can't do anything to guide these people because they're already sent astray by God because of what's in their hearts. So as long as they don't have the belief in the hereafter, they will definitely fall for these, ideologies, and no matter what you do, you cannot guide such people if they are really hypocrites. God calls them the real enemies. If you see in 63:4, when you see them, you may be impressed by their looks, and when they speak, you may listen to their eloquence. They are like standing logs. They think that every call is intended against them. These are the real enemies. Beware of them. God condemns them. They have deviated. So that happens. Like you see people. You could be impressed. I mean, sometimes you see people by their looks. They appear like angelic people and smiling and happy. And when they talk, they could be very eloquent and very convincing. As God says in another verse, some of them even bring God as a witness, and and you could very easily be impressed by these people. Some of these people are very charismatic and very charming, and so it's very easy to be fooled by such people. But God says that they're like standing logs, and they think that every call is intended against them, and they're the real enemies. So if God calls somebody your real enemy, then you have to be a fool to, consider them as your friend. When they're told, "Come, let the messenger of God pray for your forgiveness," they mockingly turn their heads, and you see them repel others and act arrogantly. So their real arrogance comes out when you actually invite them to follow the truth. If you just let them do what they want, they think they can get away with it, and they'll come and they fool you. Then it seems to work. But if you really want to see their arrogance and their true colors, you invite them to the truth. You invite them to God and His messenger. If you see them doing something wrong, you invite them to the truth, and then you see them act arrogantly, and then you see them repel others. So, I guess, the conclusion from all of this is for us to realize that, being a monotheist submitter who is devoted to God alone is an easy concept to understand, but it becomes very difficult to practice, and it can become very complicated if we decide to blur these lines, and we can see that it brings about like very complicated situations in life. So in order for us to be, one of those people who are pure and who want to keep the religion purified, we have to respect these boundaries that God has put in place for our own good. We're told to force ourselves to be with the believers for the same reasons, because when you force yourself to be with the believers, they will encourage you to be more righteous. They'll encourage you to be more reverent, and they will cultivate all these good ideas and good thoughts, in your hearts and minds. At the same time, when God tells us to run for our lives from people who are opposing God and His messengers for the very same reasons, because they will rub off on us. And so you can be the strongest, most devoted person, but if you don't practice these commandments, you're gonna lose God's protection. And you would lose God's friendship. God says, those people are exiled from God. So when you get exiled, obviously, you have no connection left with God anymore, and so you could be led to believe that you're doing righteous things, which is a great tragedy, right? When somebody is going the wrong way and they're stuck in a wishful thinking that they're being so righteous. And how many times we see that you pick up the most stray person in religion, and you can see most common thing is many of them are convinced that everybody else is wrong and they're right. Well, they don't even have any proof to support what they practice, but they're so convinced that Satan makes them believe that they're the best. So we have to really safeguard ourselves. You can see, for example, now it's a good allegory, with the coronavirus, for example. Everybody's wearing masks and practicing quarantine, and so you can sort of put those similar concepts and try to reimagine these concepts, right? How careful are we to protect ourselves from these kinds of people? Really, it should make us uncomfortable when we come near such people, and so in order for us to really grow, I think it's very important that we practice these commandments. Of course, these are not easy. A lot of people will hate you and you'll call you names, and for various categories. But the thing is that our only goal is to please God alone, and if we're doing everything to please God, God will look after us and protect us, and He'll make sure that we're successful, and everything that we want in our lives is provided for us, before we even ask for it. And obviously, the reward in the hereafter is only reserved for those people who observe God and who fulfill all of God's promises. And we have, example of, for example, Abraham's father, where when Abraham's father decided to oppose, and not listen to his son, he kept inviting him, but once he realized that his father was destined for hell, God calls Abraham the most, God calls him, he was very kind and clement. He was extremely kind and clement. And his father, he was very nice to him. But when he realized that his father was destined for hell, he disowned him. And what did he say to his father and his tribe? He said, "You will not see from us anything except animosity and hatred until you believe in God alone." What does that mean? Does that mean that he was being forceful and trying to impose his belief, or was he simply, protecting himself and observing God's commandments, so he could never be one of those, which he wasn't ever, an idol worshiper, right? He was just looking out for himself. And sometimes we have to go against our nature. We can be kind and loving people, but we have to be somewhat thick-skinned in that way when we have to deal with such people, just for our own protection, so we can please God and make it to the hereafter.